Hey gang, how's it going? Welcome to this 13th episode of The Rolling Stone. If you've been around here before, if you've subscribed to the channel, first of all, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. You know kind of the score of what we do here on Fridays. And if you are joining us for the first time, first of all, welcome. Glad to have you aboard. These videos are different from the ones that I post every Tuesday. Very few cuts or clips or anything like that. More of a stream of consciousness where I give my initial thoughts and impressions about stories that are currently in the news. And so, without further ado, let's dive right in because we've got several juicy ones for this edition of the Rolling Stone. And the first one has to do with Andy Ngo and his attack in Portland, Oregon. So, Andy Ngo, he is an independent journalist, and he is also an editor for Claire Lehman's online magazine, Quillette, which is not really conservative or liberal. It is a place for independent people to gather together and to express their thoughts and their opinions. They're part of what used to be called the Internet Dark Web. Okay, the independent thinkers, the radical thinkers. And Andy Ngo is part of the Quillette team, an independent journalist. He lives in Portland, Oregon, and so he has done a lot of reporting on Antifa because Antifa has a very strong presence in Portland, Oregon. And last Saturday, he was reporting on an Antifa gathering. There was a gathering of Gavin McGinnis's group, the Proud Boys, in Portland, Oregon. Antifa was counter-protesting. Andy Ngo was there doing what journalists are actually supposed to do. And Antifa attacked him, physically assaulted him, and attacked him so badly that he was actually sent to the hospital. He tweeted out pictures of himself. He had bruises and lacerations on his face and on his head. And in addition to that, after, the doctors, took him under the microscope and did all of their scans and everything, found out that he had actually suffered some brain hemorrhage as well because of this attack. And the terrifying thing, the really terrifying thing about this attack wasn't so much the attack itself, but the reaction to the attacks. I should say, first and foremost, that the Portland police did nothing to help Andy Ngo. They did absolutely nothing. And that is actually part of the terrifying reaction to this attack that I just mentioned, because the mayor of Portland, Oregon, Ted Wheeler, tweeted out, "I was appalled by what I saw in the video, but I support the Portland Police Bureau's decision not to intervene." Okay, so we have the mayor of the town commending the police department of Portland, Oregon, the body, the social organization that is charged with preserving law and order in a civilized society. He is actually commending them for not doing a damn thing when an innocent man just doing his job was physically assaulted. But it gets even better, because so many people and so many publications on the left were very quick to blame Andy Ngo and the quote-unquote far right for this attack. This is the terrifying reaction that I was talking about. So, for example, Vox, the website Vox, they went through, the usual boilerplate. We condemn violence in all its forms, whether it's on the left and the right. But, Andy Ngo isn't really a journalist. He is an irritant. He has, basically annoyed these people in Antifa to no end. And so, yeah, kind of, the subtext was he kind of got what was coming to him. The Huffington Post actually just went all out and said it's the far right's it's their fault that this happened. They've wanted violence for so long, and finally now they got their violence. Let's see here. Charlotte Clymer, who is the director of communications for the Human Rights Campaign, she tweeted out, being attacked today on video taken by an actual journalist, because Ngo is definitely not, is the greatest thing that could have happened to his career. You know it, I know it, he knows it, we all know it. So she is justifying this attack on him too. And there is an extra twist of irony in her defense of Antifa, because the Human Rights Campaign is a big LGBTQIA2+, whatever the rest of the, whatever the other letters are now. The Human Rights Campaign is a big advocacy group for the LGBT rights movement, LGBT group. Andy Ngo himself is actually Asian and gay, which under normal circumstances would have allowed the left to check off those two minority boxes, but because he works for Quillette and is an independent journalist, he deserved getting attacked. In any other circumstance, this attack would have been rated before it was 5 minutes old. This attack would have been termed homophobic. This would have been a hate crime. This would have been added to the catalog as proof that LGBTQ people still are not safe in America, that there is still bigotry and hatred towards them, and that more laws, more legislation has to be passed which squeeze people into basically conforming to the state's new ideology about LGBT matters and issues, right? In any other circumstances, that would have been the narrative. But since Andy Ngo is not on the left, right? It's fine. He asked for it. He deserved it. And that's the first point that I wanted to make in regards to this story. This is proof positive that being a minority doesn't depend on how you think. It doesn't depend on your skin color. It doesn't depend on who you're attracted to. It doesn't depend on where you come from. It doesn't depend on your immigration status whatsoever. It depends on how you think. Because you could be a black, transgender, lesbian, who is also an immigrant from, the Congo, right? Just came over on the boat. But if you wear a MAGA hat, or if you read Quillette, or if you watch Tucker Carlson, or maybe if you listen to Allie Beth Stuckey and her podcast, or maybe you watch Steven Crowder on YouTube, none of that matters. You are a Nazi, a fascist, a supporter of dictators and an oppressor of real minorities and women, etc., etc., etc. So the old categories of being black, being gay, being a woman, whatever, all of these boxes that have been created by intersectional identity politics, they are all funneling down to the common taproot, which is how you think, thinking the right way, being true to the ideology. And this story is proof positive that that is what has happened on the left. But the second thing that it shows is that the United States is on the edge of another civil war. And some people are going to take issue with that. They're going to say that that's hyperbolic and that, I don't know anything what I'm talking about. And I'm not saying that within the next week, the West Coast and the East Coast are going to declare war on the Midwest or anything like that. I don't know exactly how this new civil war is going to play out when it turns violent, because we're not going to divide into geographical locations like we did in the first Civil War. But I do believe that every day that goes by with stories like this and the reactions on the left that this story elicited, that violence is really the only answer. Because when you have two groups of people whose way of thinking are complete contradictories, right? there can't be any compromise. There can't be any tolerance at all, because there are no bridges, especially when, oh, you belong on that side, you're a monster, you're evil. Oh, you belong on that side, you're, whatever, a monster, evil. They're saying the same things to each other, right? Just directed in different directions. And so when that happens, and when there is nothing common binding us, when we can't see the common humanity of the people on the other side, when we say that we can't show them tolerance because, who would give tolerance to a Nazi, right? Or who would give tolerance to a communist, et cetera, then the only thing available to us at the end of the day is violence. It just is. Because these two ways of thinking, they can't keep going in parallel lines anymore. One is going to win and the other lose, or vice versa. That's the only way, really, that I see it from here where I'm sitting, that it can play out. And especially then when you see that Antifa is actually opening up, training camps to teach its members how to fight people at rallies and whenever they're protesting. When you see that, you know that this is getting real. You know that it's getting real. And I know that, some people say, oh, they're just a bunch of dweebs living in their parents' basement. But, when they're in a group and when they're obviously filled with passion and purpose like that, it gets scary. And you can make fun of them, but don't just laugh at them and, dismiss them, because then you're going to have a boot in your face sooner or later. So anyway, that's our first story. Our second story has to do with AOC again. And I am sorry, gang, that I keep bringing up AOC, but she just continues to put herself out there in the news cycle. And I am compelled to actually answer her and react to what she said, because this is actually a continuation of the episode that I uploaded on Tuesday about AOC and, her claim that detention centers are concentration camps. If you didn't catch that video, her new crusade, the newest crusade that AOC has been on, is comparing the detention centers, not just comparing the detention centers at the border where immigrants, are being kept and processed, not just comparing them to concentration camps, but saying that they are concentration camps. That has been her new crusade. And earlier this week, she and other members of Congress actually toured one of these detention centers. And AOC came back with just horror stories saying, oh my gosh, women were talking to me and they were crying because they said that they had been abused and, talked down to, women aren't drinking out of toilets, there are no supplies or anything. People are being treated worse than dogs in these camps, and this is terrible. And this is why we call them concentration camps, and this is why, we can't just give $4.5 billion in emergency funding to these places, because these ICE and Border Patrol agents are just monsters and they're just going to use that money to abuse these people, carte blanche, etc., etc., etc. Well, turns out that she has actually been lying, to just put it bluntly, okay? First of all, I need to point out that it was reported that when she actually went to that detention center, she just made a scene. She completely lost her ballast. She was, according to reports, okay, this is from the Washington Examiner, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez screamed at federal law enforcement agents, quote, in a threatening manner, unquote, during a visit to a Border Patrol facility in El Paso, Texas, and refused to tour the facility, according to two people who witnessed the incident. A group of 14 House Democrats, including Ocasio-Cortez and their aides, kicked off their visit to the region at about 11 a.m. MST Monday at the El Paso station on Hondo Pass Drive. One of the witnesses said, quote, she comes out screaming at our agents right at the beginning of the tour, crying and screaming and yelling. Okay, so she did that. okay, according to witnesses. And then she comes out of the tour. She refuses to make the tour, but then she kind of goes through the tour too at the same time. And then she lays out all of her accusations. And then when she comes out, okay, because she's tweeting, you know, what she's seeing as she's supposedly going through the tour. And so reporters are waiting for her when she comes out, when the tour is finished, and they're saying, you know, are women being forced to drink out of toilets? You know, is this happening? Is this happening? What else can you tell us? And she just blows them off. She just doesn't answer them, doesn't engage with them. She just walks right into her ride and off they go. Well, then after those charges were made, they were completely challenged, absolutely challenged by Pastor Samuel Rodriguez. Now, Samuel Rodriguez, he has been a name in immigration reform for a while now. Let's see, according to his Wikipedia page, Rodriguez has been a featured speaker in White House and congressional meetings on Hispanic American issues and justice concerns. He is a member of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships Initiative and the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, both under former President Barack Obama. He currently serves on the board of directors for the National Association of Evangelicals, and he is also president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, which is the world's largest Hispanic Christian organization, and he's the senior pastor of New Seasons Christian Worship Center in Sacramento. So anyway, Pastor Rodriguez, a man who has been a champion for immigrants and immigration reform and the Hispanic community in the United States for a while now. He hears the charges that AOC makes before she went on the tour, supposedly, and afterwards. He asks the White House if he can tour it. He goes to the same detention center and he says, you know, what she said, what is happening here has been wildly exaggerated, i.e., AOC has been lying. AOC has been lying through her teeth in order to score political brownie points. Now, AOC, she responded indirectly to Pastor Rodriguez in a tweet saying, "The right is responding to what's been exposed at the border by denying it and saying I'm lying. Hard to assert when the details I shared are corroborated by other members of Congress, court documents, migrant testimony, and new photos released today by the Inspector General." So basically she's saying that he's a liar, right? And we shouldn't believe him. However, you know, when you obviously have an agenda, as she does and as other members of Congress obviously do on this issue, I'm sorry, but I am going to, my gut instinct is to trust the pastor more than AOC. Also because he's not some sort of a right-wing shrill. Pastor Rodriguez isn't, okay? He's not a shrill. I mean, he was under 2 boards under President Obama, right? So he's not exactly what you would call a radical right-wing activist or anything. He toured the same facilities, did everything, and he's saying, no, these claims are wildly exaggerated. This is not happening. Or, if these things are happening, it's on a very minute scale, and they are not giving, AOC and her friends are not giving all of, the circumstances surrounding what's happening and explaining why what's happening is actually happening. And before I sign off on this story, I also have to make a point. The scariest thing about this story actually came from Representative Frederica Wilson, who represents a district in Florida, I believe. She said that what has to happen is that legislation has to be passed in order for people not to make fun of members of Congress, because AOC was on this tour in the facility, right? And she hears a couple of Border Patrol agents who are on the clock working at their stations laughing. She automatically assumes, right, that they're laughing at her. Frederica Wilson says, we can't have this. This is disrespectful to members of Congress. We cannot have this. First of all, it's not known for sure whether these agents were laughing at her or not. They could have been laughing at a multitude of different things. But AOC took that as a direct insult, as a direct assault and attack on her. And so she comes out and says, I was being laughed at, which goes into her whole other story about how she's the victim. She felt very, very unsafe being in this detention center surrounded by the trolls with guns, as a matter of fact. And now Frederica Wilson comes in and says, yeah, we have to have legislation saying that you can't make fun of members of Congress. If that is not a direct assault on free speech, not only that, but if that is not a direct assault on us, the people who supposedly are the ones who invest our representatives with their power, right? If that is not a direct assault on actually checking the power of the federal government through the will of the people, I don't know what is. But the fact that a member of Congress was actually able to say that out loud in public and say it with a straight face just shows what sort of environment we're living in now. So those are just my initial. Wanted to give a little sequel to that video that I did on Tuesday with Pastor Rodriguez's testimony, and then I wanted to bring up Representative Wilson's comments, because I think that is so indicative of where we are today. But that's that story. Now on to the third story, which has to do with Nike and Colin Kaepernick. So just as a refresher, Colin Kaepernick is the football player who in 2017 really broke out in the front pages of the newspapers by kneeling for the national anthem during games, right? When the national anthem was played before games, he started taking a knee, not participating. He said that he was doing this to protest and to bring awareness about the systematic racism that was so present in the country and about the injustices done to Black Americans. And that, has started a whole domino effect that we still see, like with Megan Rapinoe, and specifically with Kaepernick. Nike made him a spokesman for their company. Well, Nike, for Independence Day 2019, they were getting ready to release a tennis shoe that had the Betsy Ross flag on it. And the Betsy Ross flag is nothing more than an early design for the American flag. Okay, it has the 13 white and red stripes, the blue field, and then 13 stars for the 13 colonies, 13 states, arranged in a circle. That's all that the Betsy Ross flag is. And then Nike contacted all of its retailers and told them to send the shoes back. They weren't going to be sold. They weren't even going to be put out onto the floor. It came out that they did this after Colin Kaepernick told them, get ready for this, that some people saw the Betsy Ross flag, an early design of the American flag, as a symbol of white supremacy and racism. And surprisingly enough, this was not the first time that this charge had actually been made. I first read this story in the Wall Street Journal. That story actually linked to another story that ran in 2016, where a high school principal berated some of the school's students for waving the Betsy Ross flag during a sporting event at the school, saying that, well, some people see the Betsy Ross flag, an early design of the American flag, I will reiterate that point again, as a symbol of white supremacy and nationalism, okay? There are so many things that I could say about this, and I think that there is actually a connection to be made between this story and the Antifa story about them attacking Andy Ngo that I opened up the video with, but I want to save that for a regular On the Stone video. So this is what I am going to say about this, okay? Pulling up a story here. In the first place, this shows how quickly groupthink spreads among the left. Okay? Because this has all happened within the span of a few days. Okay? This all comes out, okay? And then immediately after Colin Kaepernick says something, everyone else starts to reiterate this point and starts to follow up on it. So we have, and not just nobody's, I shouldn't say that, but not just, people on Twitter, right? We have, for example, a presidential candidate who said that Julian Castro, who is one of the multitude of people running for the presidential nomination on the Democratic ticket, he compared the Betsy Ross flag to actually the Confederate battle flag, saying that it's just as hateful and it's just as problematic as that. And this shows how much work we still need in our country and in our culture to actually become a country that fully accepts everyone for who they are. Okay, a presidential candidate reiterated what a former football player and a spokesman for Nike said. Not only that, get a load of this, okay? Georgetown professor Michael Eric Dyson compares the Betsy Ross flag to the swastika, okay? This is from the Washington Times. Georgetown professor and MSNBC commentator Michael Eric Dyson declared Wednesday, July the 3rd, that America's first flag is a symbol of hate, much like the swastika or burning cross. He argued, words matter, symbols matters too. Why don't we wear a swastika for July 4th? Because I don't know, it makes a difference. The cross burning on somebody's lawn, why don't we just have a Nike celebration of the cross? Well, because those symbols are symbols of hate. And, he says that it represents something that is offensive. The whole idea that the Betsy Ross flag is offensive is because it's the flag under which slavery was conducted, okay, in the American colonies and after America declared her independence from England. That's total baloney, okay? Yes, that was the flag under which slavery was conducted because guess what? Yeah, we all know that that the United States allowed slaves at the begin with. That's kind of why we had a civil war, not quite 90 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Everything was going to hell and everything was falling apart because the slavery question was no longer going to go away naturally like the founders thought, and it could no longer be ignored like more and more people were trying to do during the 19th century. And so there's a war going on. We all know that slavery was part of the United States. We're never going to be allowed to forget that. But to say that this flag was specifically a symbol of hate, no, not buying it. It was a symbol of a new nation. That is it. So there's that, but just the way that this has spread, that this groupthink has spread so swiftly, it's like a contagion. Colin Kaepernick says, this flag is problematic, it is offensive. And then not only do the sycophants on Twitter and social media pick up on it, but you have presidential candidates and professors from Georgetown, not just little backwoods places or, crazy places in California. I mean, Georgetown, one of the most respected schools in the United States. It's right up there with Chicago, with Harvard and Yale. Maybe not quite the same caliber, but when you think Georgetown, you think prestige, you think dignity, you think academia, you think, a person with a Georgetown, education is a good person. They got a quality education. These are the people. These are the people who are now, forwarding this idea of racism and bigotry in absolutely nothing whatsoever, in something as innocuous, something as innocent, something as historical as the Betsy Ross flag. But anyway, I've been blathering on for long enough, and you guys have been patient with me for long enough. So, Have a great weekend. Hope you all had a happy 4th of July. And I will see you all again on Tuesday here on Top of the Stone, gang. Ciao.